and welcome to Global Health TV. Today we'll be looking at transport and health and the role of space observation in helping some of the poorest communities on the planet. Did you know, globally, every year around 1.3 million people are killed in road traffic accidents, with more than 20 million people suffering non-fatal injuries, including disabilities. Road traffic injuries cause considerable economic pain too, not just to individuals but to countries. Cost of treatment, loss of productivity for those killed or disabled, and carers who need to take time off work to look after the injured mean road traffic crashes cost most countries 3% of their gross domestic product, according to the World Health Organization. More than 90% of road traffic deaths occur in low and middle income countries. Road traffic injury death rates are highest in Africa and lowest in Europe. Even within high-income countries, people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are more likely to be involved in road traffic crashes. I caught up with Greg Winfree, CEO and Director of Texas A&M Institute during the ITS World Congress in Los Angeles, California, about why traffic deaths in the US are at a 20-year high. So, Greg, why is this happening?
Well, it's an interesting question. You know, they're at a 20-year high in the United States. Our researchers here have found some interesting information that's extrapolated from the data, of course, going over the pandemic/quarantine period led to some interesting insights because we knew that roadway miles were down, vehicle miles traveled were down, but the fatality numbers seem to be increasing, and we were able to determine that the primary culprit really appears to be speed. As the roads were less congested, the roadways were free of traffic at levels that probably hadn't been seen in modern times. And that encouraged folks to go out and choose their own speed. Law enforcement was down because of being devoted to first responder and other activities that the pandemic required. So there was a lot of lawlessness and freedom to choose speed on the roadways. So even though the absolute number of roadway crashes were down, those crashes that did occur tend to have more serious injuries and fatal consequences. And then you double that down with decreased seatbelt usage. I don't know if folks felt emboldened that, hey, there's no one else on the road, so I don't need to fix my seatbelt. You know, we had achieved an 86% seatbelt usage here in the U.S. I don't think we have absolute numbers from a percentage standpoint as to whether or not there was a decline, but in those serious injury and fatality cases, in many instances, there was a failure to use seatbelts. And then another observation I would add, the instance of day drinking and folks who were, using substances to help them through what was a very fraught time for many of us. And this is a global issue, but certainly here in the U.S., the factors I would say are speed, lack of seatbelt usages on the roadways, and probably an increase in the consumption of alcoholic and probably other substances, but certainly there was a marked increase in day drinking is how the term became to be known.
In what situations do most road deaths occur in the US right now?
Well, in the US, I'd say about half of all traffic deaths occur in what we identify as roadway departure crashes, where a vehicle either leaves the pavement or crosses over into the opposite direction. Probably 25 to 27% occur in intersections, and unfortunately 19% include a pedestrian or a bicyclist. And those numbers are increasing, as well as motorcyclist fatalities, particularly in rural areas. Single male driver off the roadway, more often than not into a tree, is probably one of the leading causes of death amongst young men 25 and younger. So roadway departure crashes are particularly vexing whether you go, into a wooded area or cross into oncoming traffic. Those present very difficult and challenging situations that often have serious consequences.
Realistically, how much do you expect road safety to improve in the next 5, 10, and even 50 years?
When I was a Fed, as we call it in the U.S., a federal government employee with the U.S. Department of Transportation, we used to say that the first 50 years of vehicle safety were spent on protecting vehicle occupants and have them survive crashes. Well, we foresee the next 50 years as avoiding crashes altogether, which is what the ITS community is all about. That's a very broad way of saying that as these technologies continue to march forward, connected vehicle, automated vehicle, autonomous driver assist systems, as more and more technology becomes available to the lay road user, including improvements to roadway infrastructure, the ability of infrastructure to communicate to vehicles in real time, to help with situational awareness, that safety cocoon around drivers will become more pronounced. Road safety is an extraordinarily complex issue. It involves, again, system users, the asset managers, the stewards, law enforcement, vehicle manufacturers, emergency medical service providers. So it's a complex matrix. No one element of the system can provide a comprehensive solution, but it's clear that the various entities involved in road safety, they have to continue to work together to reduce the risk of fatalities and serious injuries. Now, as we sit here, we must stop the trend of increased risk, right? That's the big issue, increased risk, folks accepting increased risk, and then work continuously to lower it. There is no tipping point after which we can rest. It'll take a sustained effort over many years to get to the goal. It's not something where we can put a thumbtack on the calendar and say we're there. It's going to be, kind of a continuous improvement exercise until we can look back and measure the distance that we've come.
So the focus is shifting from the safety of individual vehicle users to cyclists, pedestrians and public transport users. Toks Omishhakin is the Secretary of Transportation for the California State Transport Agency. My colleague Annalisa Burgos caught up with Toks at the recent ITS World Congress in Los Angeles about the challenge of improving transport for all road users and all communities.
And joining us now is Toks Omishhakin. He is the Secretary of the California State Department of Transportation. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thanks for having me on.
And you are actually focused on a very important topic, equitable transportation. Tell us, what are the biggest issues you're finding here in California?
Well, for many years, from a transportation standpoint, the way we've invested, we haven't invested in a way that is thinking about every single person that uses the system. So it's been heavily focused on people who probably mostly drive, not people who may need to use other modes like walk, bike, or use public transportation. So we're trying to double back and correct some of those errors and some of those mistakes from the past. And when we made those mistakes in the past, by the way, we also built a highway system that cut off many underserved communities interstate. And so we cut them off physically, and that also meant harm sometimes from a social standpoint and even from a health standpoint, because people with all those cars and the trucks driving through their communities, that meant they were breathing in that poor air, that bad air, but also their access was increasingly limited because of the way we designed and built the highway system. So we're changing that in California. It's a new day, it's a new dawn. Have a Governor Newsom, who's heavily invested in equity, and we're making those investments happen through CalSTA, my organization, and Caltrans, High Speed Rail, all the organizations under it, and of course the partnership with the federal government as well, the Biden-Harris administration connection.
What are the biggest challenges you're finding as you're trying to fix and retrofit some of the things that have already been in place for many, many years?
That's exactly it, is that we've built the system for so many years, for 60 to 70 years. A lot of the major highway investments in the country came down in the 1950s, the mid 50s, and we followed that same pattern for the next 50 to 60, 70 years, and now we have an awakening. There's a bit of a renaissance in our industry. We now understand that what our jobs ultimately is to help people across the board. Not how do you help cars get from one destination to the next destination as quickly as possible, but how do you help people get from one place to the next as safely as possible. So that's been the challenge.
Mm-hmm. And equity is such a big part of that diversity, inclusivity, different perspectives. I guess going forward, what are some of the recommendations or things that you would want to see come out of this industry?
Well, I think the important thing right now is that we're having the right conversations. And those conversations are going from a lot of talk to finally policy and regulation. And from that to resources, meaning dollars, are being put in place to ultimately to implement a lot of the ideas. A few years ago, it was kind of taboo, to be honest with you, to talk about how we've made some poor decisions from a transportation standpoint when it comes to equity. But now that has completely changed. Most people in leadership or middle management or lower level, entry level in our business, they believe in this, they're on board. So it's leading to policy, it's leading to investment. Governor Newsom recently put in place a $47 billion multi-year transportation budget. Outside of the gas tax that we traditionally get, an additional $47 billion. And in doing that, in spending that money, we need to be wise to make sure that we're doing that work through an equity lens for all people at all levels, all genders, all economic status, that they may be on. So it's an exciting time, probably the most exciting time in the history of the transportation and technology profession.
Very good, and we're looking forward to seeing what comes out of Caltrans. Thank you so much, Toks. Good to see you.
So, it's one of the most exciting times in transport history, and it's also a very exciting time in space, with NASA's plans to land the first woman and the first person of colour on the moon. But space technologies, and particularly Earth observations, have the potential to improve the health of communities across our own planet. At the recent International Astronautical Congress in Paris, reporter Rudaba Abbas caught up with Simonetta Cheli from the European Space Agency.
I'm now joined by Simonetta Cheli, who is the Director of Earth Observations at the European Space Agency. Thank you very much for coming and joining us today, Simonetta.
Thank you.
I'm going to start by asking you what sort of contributions Earth observation satellites have provided for us in regards to climate change.
Yes, Earth observation satellites, particularly those of the European Space Agency, have provided a lot of contributions in terms of support to the essential climate variables, those indicators which are associated to climate evolution, climate change. And we work closely with scientists from all over Europe and all over the world to provide them data, to include those data in the climate models. Two examples. One is the ice melting. You know that there's about 1 billion tons of ice melting every year. Caps, a lot in the Arctic and Antarctic, which are permanently monitored night and day, also through radar instruments. So that melting of the ice has been certainly one of the indicators of the evolution of climate. And that melting of the ice, it's also impacting very much the sea level rise, which is impacted by the rise of temperatures, but also by the rise of ice which is melting. So another parameter that we've been managing to look and monitor very much over the last 30 years with satellite data, also Sentinel-6, Michael Freilich satellite, which is a collaboration between ESA, NASA, NOAA, the European Commission and EUMETSAT, is a satellite which has an altimetry on board and looks at the trends in terms of variables associated to the sea level rise. And sea level rise, you have to look into long period of time, like for all climate variables. And those data integrate data and complement data from other missions, national and Europeans, which were previously available. They give us a trend currently which is shifting in terms of sea level rise from 3.5 millimeter per year into 4.8 as an average trend overall, which is quite worrying.
And what are the challenges in allowing a wide audience to leverage satellite data, especially in remote or resource-poor settings?
I think today satellite data, especially related to environment, Earth observation, climate change, are a wealth for everybody. So the investments that Europe is making in those satellites, today we have currently 15 satellites in operation and 41 in development, should be made available for the entire community. And this is exactly what ESA is doing with an open and free data policy for the Earth observation satellite data, which provides the opportunity for everybody all over the world to exploit those data, even though those who have not invested in the satellites. So that's important for supporting development aid, for supporting more widely the Sustainable Development Goals, aims, which have among those objectives climate change, but not only, food security, for example, or better management of water resources. So I think Earth observation data today constitute a wealth for everybody, also for those who are in remote regions. What we also do, we develop a lot of tools which can be helpful in terms of developing training, in terms of creating capacity and supporting competence everywhere in the world in terms of the exploitation of the data, of the processing of the data, and also we promote projects on validation of application areas. No matter if it's on food security, we work with partners worldwide at regional and local level, SANSA in South Africa or the FAO, to basically make sure that the data available are integrated into real projects with real users, no matter if it's on food, no matter if it's on agriculture, but also in environmental monitoring, deforestation or other issues.
So we've seen a spate of sort of flooding in Pakistan and Italy as well recently. Some of the countries, as you mentioned, who are not signatories. How would you help those countries as well?
Those countries are not necessarily signatories or members of ESA, but they're very much beneficiaries of the available tools and data which we have. An example is the International Charter on Disasters, where 17 space agencies from the world since over 20 years put in common on a voluntary basis in-kind provision of Earth observation data whenever there is a natural disaster. This was the case recently for Pakistan, but also for many more events like the Las Palmas volcano or the earthquake in Haiti a few years ago, and many more. We have about an activation per week of that International Charter on Disasters, and ESA is providing the coordination of the Secretariat, but we alternate among space agencies of the world to provide data to manage who is doing the maps which are very relevant for those who need to be on site, civil protection agencies, NGOs, United Nations entities. So that's a real example of international collaboration using and exploiting at best Earth observation data for disasters.
What's the role of collaboration in finding solutions for local satellite adaptation? Can you talk us through some examples?
Yes, we have today a program which is called GDA, Global Development Activities in ESA, and this program is a collaboration with the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. We work with them since about 10 years. We have a structured collaboration and we support projects which are very much concrete projects in priority fields associated to, for example, the World Bank priorities in different regions of the world, in Latin America, in Africa, in Southeast Asia with the Asian Development Bank, for example, on crop monitoring in Southeast Asia, rice monitoring, or on coastal erosion in Bangladesh, and in that type of project, what ESA does, not only it provides the expertise in terms of knowledge of what available techniques we can use and exploit for those projects, provides the data sources, it provides the training, and also, of course, together with the partners locally, but also internationally, the visibility of those projects. And there we cooperate very much with GEO, which is another network of non-space actors, but environment actors, civil protection actors, over 100 countries that work to support and to integrate the use of EO data in the daily life of citizens.
Simonetta Cheli, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And that's it for today's show. Next time we talk to Charles Rotamy, President of the American Society of Human Genetics, about how the increased participation of African scientists and the communities they work with is transforming the field of genetics and genomics.
you.